Hello to America and hello to the world. Welcome to Barbara Stone Live. This is a show that speaks truth to the tyranny of the U.S. government. The purpose of this presentation today is fivefold. First, to impart the indisputable facts and law that evidence the U.S. government is waging a war against humanity by stealing, stripping, and depriving the public of our unalienable rights. To enlighten the public about their unalienable rights and that their rights are their most precious, valuable, and important possessions. Number three, to wake up America and the world to the depravity of the crimes being committed by the deprivation of our unalienable rights, and for the public to understand these crimes are the worst possible crimes under international laws that are known as atrocity crimes. We are in a U.S. Holocaust, far worse than any in the history of the world. Number four, to reveal some of the depraved tactics being used to divert the public from understanding that the true agenda of the U.S. war on humanity is to enslave its population and confiscate their assets, their families, their liberty, and their lives by stealing their unalienable rights. And lastly, to convey that the atrocity crimes can only be remedied by the lawful actions of we the people, and that the only way this can happen is for the public to stop deluding itself that the government is going to self-correct its systemic, deliberate, and highly profitable human trafficking crime syndicate. Just as was stated in the Declaration of Independence, we are stating, to prove this, let these facts be submitted to a candid world. This platform is not intended to express my personal opinions. It is intended to describe the facts and the law. I head up a group of hundreds of victims of the U.S. tyrannical government all over the country. I am a personal victim and have experienced personally the barbaric acts I will be discussing. It is for this reason that I have declared my candidacy as the people's president. You can read more about my platform on my website called peoplesrightsforum.com. By way of my background, I was formerly an attorney for over 25 years with a bar certificate in New York and in Florida. I was in practice with some of the most prominent firms in the country. I handled only real estate matters and never set foot in court until I became embroiled in my own government racket in what they call, quote, guardianship, that resulted in my mother being extorted of all of her property and her home and being murdered by inconceivable acts of torture and toxic drugs. I resigned from the bar union once I realized that the bar was my mortal enemy, as they were the kingpins and the cover-up arm of the racket. I became a vice president and real estate broker with Corcoran, a prominent national brokerage firm, in their New York office. I had never received a bar complaint, and in fact received a letter from the Florida bar thanking me for my many years of service. But my bar certificate was stripped and stolen from me after I retired from the practice of law because I was a whistleblower. Of course, they had no jurisdiction over me after I had retired, but I later learned this is a criminal tactic they use against whistleblower attorneys for the reasons I will describe in a minute. You may recall that I call it a bar certificate, not a license. This is because attorneys have no license. They certified themselves through their own bar union comprised of bar members in the state Supreme Court. To have a license would involve state action, and that would make the state responsible and liable, just as they should be, and just as they are with other professions as they issue licenses for other professions. The bar farce has so many tentacles, but that is not the purpose of this presentation. We can address that topic in a later show. Before getting into the points I want to make in this show, I just want to describe a few of the dirty bar tactics, as it will help you understand how I have become an authority on these tactics and the tactics used in the U.S. war on humanity. Some of the corrupt reasons why they steal the bar certificate of whistleblower attorneys is because whistleblower attorneys are generally involved in countless lawsuits to remedy the racket in which they have become embroiled. By unlawfully stripping whistleblower attorneys of their bar certificate and their livelihood, they attempt to silence and threaten them, to make them struggle for financial survival, to make it almost impossible for them to get other employment because they poison public reporting records with lies, to deprive them of their whistleblower protection, to slur and defame them by weaponizing the laws against them, by referring to them as a disbarred attorney, and threaten them if they file on behalf of others using their laws that specifically allow these filings. This was true in my case, as I have probably filed close to 100 lawsuits in state and federal courts all over the country, all to seek remedy on behalf of myself and others for the guardian genocide racket and the child trafficking racket. My lawsuits include at least 4 filings in the U.S. Supreme Court of Criminals, and I can now say with certainty that the government crime syndicate only exists because the Supreme Court of Criminals are conspirators and its protection arm. The same is true of the top levels of all branches. I have made speeches at the top levels of legislative branches, filed countless criminal claims in federal and state law enforcement, and become embroiled in every conceivable government maze to obtain remedy by government employees for the crimes of their fellow government employees. What was the outcome? An arsenal of savage retaliation and cover-up tactics that would almost be humorous and the fodder for a highly entertaining late-night television show if it were not real and factual acts of terrorism. The point is that having been in their arena as an attorney for over 25 years, a victim myself of their rackets, and an authority on how they use their color of law courts, laws, and agencies to perpetuate, perpetrate, and protect their crimes, I am in a unique position to speak truth to tyranny and make clear that we are in a U.S. Holocaust far more dangerous than any other in the history of the world. It has become very evident that these crimes persist and escalate because, number one, they can only be remedied by the victims and the public acting in unity, and number two, the public and the victims still do not realize that the crimes are deliberate, systemic, and could only occur because they are done in conspiracy by all branches of government. It is inconceivable that any victim could still think that they can go up alone against the army of terrorists who are involved in their racket. So the public and the victims do the very worst thing that they could do. They seek remedy from the perpetrators. They go to the next tier of conspirators or another branch of government to seek remedy from the first government perpetrators. This is what happens. 1, it creates, escalates, and adds more cover-up crimes to overcome. And 2, it actually prolongs the time sequence for real remedy that will only be achieved when the victims and the public unite and remedy themselves. We all grapple with what are the concrete avenues to remedy. The first step is to stop remaining in the government maze. We need to understand the crime syndicate originates with their unlawful, void, so-called laws that steal our unalienable rights. The sooner the public unites and says no, that we do not consent to the rape of our unalienable rights and demands the nullification of these already void laws, and their removal from our taxpayer records, the sooner we are on the road to remedy. We need to refuse to engage with the crime syndicate that has replaced the legitimate government. We need to boycott and defund the color of law branches of government. We need to prepare an audit of the government. We need people's grand juries because if we don't protect our own rights, shame on us. We need to demand international sanctions and accountability from the farcical international agencies who we pay for this purpose. None of these solutions and remedies can be done until the public wakes up, unites, and acts in unison. My presentation will be a bit long today as it covers these basic points, so I hope everyone will stay with me because without understanding what is at the crux of the U.S. war on humanity, it is impossible to remedy it. The U.S. war is being waged on every front. It is an attack on our children, our families, our free speech, an invasion of our privacy, and on our freedom using their for-profit jail system. The government war against humanity is systemic and intertwined and interconnected at every level of government. It is engineered and perpetrated to steal our unalienable rights. Those two words, quote, unalienable rights, are the most important words you need to understand. They are your most precious, valuable, and important possessions. And it is those possessions, our unalienable rights, that the government wants. Once the government owns our unalienable rights, we are slaves of the government. They own our identities, so they own and control our assets, our families, our liberty, and our lives. It is that diabolically simple. The government wants our unalienable rights. That is because the United States government has created the largest and most profitable human trafficking enterprise in the history of the world that is run by depriving, stealing, and stripping our birthrights and converting our unalienable rights for their use. We become the property of the government. In their vernacular, we are, quote, wards of the government. Each and every branch of the entire U.S. government works to that end. It works exactly in reverse of its authorized and legitimate purpose, which is to uphold and protect our unalienable rights. The monstrous U.S. Holocaust that has resulted from the deprivation of our rights could not occur but for the fact that all branches of government are working together to that end. This is exactly what was done in Nazi Germany, where an unfavored class of citizens were stripped of their unalienable rights under color of law in order to confiscate their assets and exterminate them. I refer to the void illegal right-stripping laws, the jurisdictionless courts, and their so-called orders as Nuremberg laws, Nuremberg courts, and Nuremberg orders. This is how the war is waged. 1. The color of law legislative branch is used to concoct illegal void Nuremberg laws that deprive us of our unalienable rights. 2. The color of law executive branch that is occupied by imposter governors at the state level and an imposter president at the federal level is used to sign the void Nuremberg laws of the executive branch and to concoct their own Nuremberg laws by void so-called executive orders. The color of law judicial branch that has no jurisdiction to adjudicate void Nuremberg laws or to adjudicate our unalienable rights is used to issue void Nuremberg orders to carry out atrocity crimes. Number 4, these atrocity crimes are covered up by the law enforcement arm of the government. So all branches of government are conspiring together to enslave us. The reason their diabolically simple agenda has succeeded for so long is that the government uses an arsenal of tactics to divert the public from understanding its slavery agenda and how its slavery agenda is the product of collusion by all branches of government. One of the tactics used to mask the crime is to call their void Nuremberg laws and courts and agencies by false protection sounding names. A few examples will be described in a few minutes. This is exactly what was done in Nazi Germany. One of the most infamous Nazi laws was called, quote, "For the protection of the people and the state," that was devised to steal the unalienable rights of their unfavored class of citizens, that essentially declared them dead under the law, to seize their assets and their liberty, and to exterminate them. Another diversion tactic is to hurl accusations against other countries by accusing them of the very crimes being perpetrated by the U.S. Another tactic is to weaponize the laws against the victims by charging them with the crimes being perpetrated by the government in order to incarcerate the victims, to silence and threaten them. We are in an advanced stage of ruin and rot. Even the collusive and corrupt to the core establishment media has categorized the U.S. as a rotted carcass. The U.S. war on humanity is the most important matter in the world. These atrocity crimes are not only crimes against the families directly affected, they are monstrous moral and economic crimes against all Americans and the entire world. The moral decay of the government puts the lives of all Americans under tyranny and in danger. And the economic consequences are staggering. All taxpayer Americans are paying trillions in taxes to fund human traffickers, slave traders, and murderers. And they are funding staggering Medicare, Medicaid, and IRS fraud and money laundering. The U.S. population is being extorted to pay taxation without representation. The very crime that is called, quote, an intolerable act in the Declaration of Independence and caused the American colonists to declare independence and secede from England. Our unalienable rights are not constitutional or civil rights, as the government attempts to have the public believe, to buy into their agenda that they can legislate, regulate, or adjudicate our unalienable rights by their man-made laws and jurisdictionless courts. Our unalienable rights are our birthrights. They are inherent to and indivisible from our existence. They exist because we exist as living and breathing human beings. They are affirmed under the Declaration of Independence as being endowed by the Creator. They are affirmed under the UN Declaration of Human Rights as inherent by virtue of our human dignity. Our unalienable rights cannot be stripped, deprived, trespassed, or taken from us. We cannot even consent to the taking of our unalienable rights. The only way our unalienable rights can be infringed is if someone is convicted of a crime by a jury of their peers, not by a judicial government employee wearing a black robe. Even then, the ability of the government to seize their unalienable rights is limited and restricted. The main function of government is to uphold and protect the rights of its population. This principle is articulated and affirmed in the Declaration of Independence that states, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men." I want to stop here and ask if a cosmic light bulb is starting to go off. We no longer have a legitimate government. There is no separation of powers, if there ever was. We are being governed by what is defined as a transnational crime syndicate under the United Nations international laws. The U.S. government is perpetrating all four categories of atrocity crimes that are defined under the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court as crimes against humanity, crimes of genocide, war crimes, and crimes of aggression. Moreover, its atrocity crimes are a form of war crime called perfidy under the Geneva Convention. Perfidy is an act of sabotage by a country that operates under a false flag to invite confidence that it is acting as a protector when the intent is to betray that confidence. In addition, theft by the government is the crime of pillaging, also a war crime under the Geneva Conventions and their additional protocols, which are international treaties that attempt to apply the doctrine of universal jurisdiction to crimes such as genocide, crimes against humanity, torture, and war crimes. They are so exceptionally grave that they affect the fundamental interest of the international community as a whole. This is what the UN says about transnational organized crime. Transnational organized crime, including drugs, arms, and human trafficking, affects peace, security, and stability wherever it occurs. It undermines the authority and effectiveness of state institutions, erodes the rule of law, and weakens law enforcement structures. Transnational organized crime and drug trafficking do not exist in isolation. They belong to a malignant complex that can include terrorism, money laundering, and illegal arms trafficking. The United Nations itself is hardly a beacon of good government. The UN, just like the US, uses its rhetoric to pretend legitimacy when if the UN complied with and enforced its charter, it would hold governments criminally and civilly liable for their atrocity crimes. Instead, the UN has evolved into a business to profit from human rights abuses by controlling a multi-trillion-dollar agency that was intentionally created without independent military force to subject government perpetrators of atrocity crimes to any consequences. But it is important to assimilate the international laws of these corrupted international agencies to understand the barbaric extent of the crimes by the U.S. government. The U.S. federal and state criminal laws do not even begin to characterize the depravity of these crimes. It is the international laws that define their magnitude. Specifically, the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court that identifies the four atrocity crimes as being crimes against humanity, genocide, crimes of aggression, and war crimes. The closest the U.S. comes to identifying these crimes are in federal laws 18 U.S.C. 241 and 242. These crimes are defined as deprivation of rights under color of law and conspiracy against rights. The criminal penalties under those codes include life imprisonment and the death sentence. The reason I focus on and head up a group of hundreds of families whose inalienable rights are stripped and stolen by the government and genocide and child trafficking syndicates they call, quote, guardianship and, quote, family court is because these crimes against families are the most monstrous as they violate the very sanctity of human life. The U.S. is in a Holocaust far worse than the Nazi Holocaust. The numbers far exceed the 6 million Holocaust victims. The numbers are staggering, in the hundreds of millions. It is being perpetrated by a country that presents itself as a world leader, pretending to be a democratic republic when nothing could be further from the truth. Its acts are those of a fifth world country, and perhaps a new category should be created so the U.S. could more appropriately be classified in that category. Moreover, the U.S. has failed to sign most of the core international human rights treaties. In the family court, the federal government has devised Nuremberg laws that pay incentives to insider traffickers to steal and trade children. They call their trafficking entities by protection-sounding names with alphabet soup designations, such as Health and Human Services, or HHS, and Child Protection Services, or CPS, that they fund with taxpayer money to kidnap and traffic children through human trafficking courts they call family courts. Many times the traffickers come out in the dead of night with so-called law enforcement who acts as their protection arm and literally use weapons and threats to steal children from their families. They call their Nuremberg laws by protection-sounding names such as Adoption and Safe Families Act or by the vague name of Title IV. They don't even bother calling Title IV by a false name, as it is used to encompass an array of unrelated matters such as student loans, Social Security, and child trafficking, so they can move money around, fund and launder money using just that one Nuremberg law. Each state has its own child trafficking laws. In the Guardian racket, they have also connived state and federal Nuremberg laws with protection-sounding or vague names. So too, they use taxpayer funds to pay the predators. One of their federal Nuremberg laws is called Public Law 115-70. It was sponsored in 2017 by Connecticut legislative career criminal Richard Blumenthal by giving it the false protection-sounding name Protecting Seniors from Telemarketers, when its real purpose and use is to steal taxpayer funds to fund the Guardian traffickers. As is their typical tactic, Richard Blumenthal professed outrage at the Guardian racket by his rants at a fake hearing where he denounced the racket as a fiefdom and described the perpetrators as, quote, judges who make a ton of money. He then funded the racket using his Nuremberg law. The Guardian racket is run in similar fashion as the child trafficking racket, but it is unique in that the end goal is to murder the victim after all of their assets have been stolen by inconceivable physical and emotional abuse and toxic drugs. The crimes occur in the guise of a court proceeding in order that the predators can get paid by their victim by submitting bills to perform their crimes that they categorize as services. The victims are ordered by Nuremberg orders to pay their abusers, traffickers, and murderers. The Guardian racket actually constitutes murder for hire under federal law 18 U.S.C. 1958. Again, 18 U.S.C. 1958, murder for hire. It constitutes the crime of genocide under international laws, specifically the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court. As stated earlier, these crimes affect every American and the entire world as they are at risk, and they fund these rackets by their taxpayer funds. The fraudulent color of law U.S. government is not going to self-correct its systemic, highly profitable transnational crime syndicate. Only the public itself can effectuate remedy. And that can only happen when we, the people, understand, unite, and convey the same message. And that message is just say no. We do not consent to the rape of our unalienable rights. Instead, the public has become its own worst enemy for the reasons we have discussed and will be summarized here. The public has lost all notion of common sense. Any iota of common sense would dictate that it would be impossible for the government atrocity crimes to occur unless they were deliberate and carried out in conspiracy by all branches of government. The public is allowing itself to be lulled into the propaganda that these heinous crimes are somehow normal because they have been introduced gradually. The public is being deliberately diverted and deceived by the arsenal of government diversion tactics being hurled, so they don't even understand the crux of the crime is the deprivation of our unalienable rights, much less be able to expose and articulate it. They are enabling the crimes to perpetuate by seeking remedy from the perpetrators. This is a huge wake-up call. The complacency of the public is almost as outrageous as the atrocity crimes. Until the public wakes up to the U.S. war on humanity and takes lawful action for remedy, we ourselves are enabling our persecution. Everyone has a duty and a responsibility to participate. This platform is intended to be interactive, and I encourage everybody to communicate with me by contacting me at barbara@barbarastone.org. Again, barbara@barbarastone.org. I look forward to hearing from you.